Sorry, David, we can hear you well, but we can't hear Mikko so well, I think.
Same.
Yeah. Kuuliko Mikko?
I gather we're going to wait a minute or two.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Does it work? Okay. All right. So let's begin. First of all, thank you, David, and congratulations. So first of all, thank you so much for your collaboration and help throughout the process. And I began this process in 2019, and we've been working on it since then. And I was very happy to find this publisher, Rosebud, where we are now. This is their bookstore in central Helsinki, and they were willing to publish this in Finnish. And I'm very happy for all the wonderful help that you provided me, updating some of the data, and also writing a few words in the beginning of the book for this edition. Thank you so much.
Can I interrupt and just say the Finnish translation is only appearing thanks to you, Mikko. All the efforts that you've put in for many years now to make it happen. So the thanks is due to you as well as to the publisher and the bookseller. And the fact that we're all here today is because of your efforts. So again,
thank you so much. Thank you. So welcome everyone, and we're so happy to be here. Kiitos kaikille, kun tulitte tänään tänne. Ja David on luvannut pitää lyhyen esittelyn tästä kirjasta. Ja hän pitää tämmöisen noin 15 minuuttia, 20 minuuttia kestävän puheen englanniksi. Ja jos jollain on sitten kysyttävää ja tarvii jotain spesifiä sanaa tai käsitettä tai jotain muuta selittää tai kääntää, niin aina voi sanoa ja keskeyttää. Ja autan mielelläni. Mutta kiitos kaikille, kun olette tullut, ja toivottavasti ostatte kirjan myös. Kiitos paljon.
So just to confirm first with Mikko, well, okay, one quick check. I assume people can see and hear me okay. I had asked the question earlier about translation, and because of the connection, we couldn't hear what you said. So should I pause for translation, or what's suitable here?
Seems like everyone will understand, and they said that if your English is quite as good as it now, so we're pretty good. Thank you.
My English is usually pretty good, and it's a good thing because it's my only competent language. Despite my many years in Japan, that's far from fluent. Anyway, thank you, Mikko. Thank you for your work. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for coming. I think it's really important that we're here today, fundamentally because, as most of us probably realize, the ecological crisis is not only urgent, but it is arguably the most important, the most serious crisis that humanity has ever faced. A few years ago, Noam Chomsky, very important American intellectual, said that right now is the most dangerous time in human history. He said that in an interview back in 2020, and frankly, things have only become somewhat worse since then, including ecologically, including levels of carbon in the atmosphere, extinction event, levels of pollution, and so forth. So we naturally want to know, what do spiritual traditions have to offer that can help us and understand and respond appropriately to such a crisis? should we do when difficult times come? And the master replied, I think this is difficult to show on camera. The master says, embrace them.
I lost you for a second. Oh.
Transformation. I'll come back to that in a moment. The other...
I'm sorry, we lost you for a second.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, that story may be not so important. Let me go into the second one, right? A student asked the Chinese master Yun Men, what is the fruit of a lifetime of practice? In other words, if we meditate, if we follow the Zen path for a whole lifetime, what's the result? And his reply was very simple, responding appropriately. I love that reply because it reminds us, right? The spiritual path isn't about finding some place to hide away. It's not about escaping or transcending this world. For Zen and Buddhism in general, it's very much about engaging with it more fully. But nonetheless, it still leaves us with this question. What do the Buddhist traditions offer that can help us understand and respond to what seems to be the greatest crisis in human history? And one answer is maybe nothing. The Buddha lived some 2,400 years ago. Scholars still don't know exactly when. But very much a very different time and place, Iron Age India. And the kind of challenges, the kind of problems that he and people at that time faced were very different than what we're experiencing now. They may have had some ecological problems, but nothing like this worldwide challenge that we face. Nonetheless, and well, I should add to that, because of it, that has important implications for how we read Buddhist texts. There's no Buddhist text that directly addresses the kind of ecological
Näköjään tämä wifi pätkii täällä.
Buddhist teachings that we can follow up on. One of them that I find very interesting is there does seem to be a parallel, I would say a very deep, profound parallel between what Buddhism has always said about our individual situation and our collective situation today. Buddhism focuses on dukkha. The word translated into English is suffering. The Buddha said very clearly all he had to teach was dukkha and how to end it. And at the core, or at the heart of our dukkha, is the delusion of separation. The delusion that there's a me inside, separate from you, separate from other people, separate from the rest of the world. And along with that delusion is the idea that my well-being, my happiness, I can pursue that separately from my concern for what might be happening with you. And so on the Buddhist path, it's very important to realize our interconnectedness, that in fact we're not separate from each other at all. And it seems to me, in fact, I would say it's even kind of obvious that there's a parallel between that teaching, the emphasis in Buddhism on letting go and overcoming the delusion of a separate self, with our collective situation, because isn't it the same? We as a species feel that we are separate from the rest of the earth. At least that's the way that we treat the earth, right? We treat the earth as a source of materials and as a place to dump stuff. But we don't realize, we don't live according to the realization that we are part of the earth, that our species is one of the manifestations of Mother Earth. I think that's a very important parallel to explore. But in the brief time today, I would like to emphasize something else, which frankly I think might be the single most important, the single most relevant teaching of Buddhism for our ecological crisis. And the name for this teaching is the Bodhisattva path. Early Buddhism, the Buddhism of India, for example, and Southeast Asia, the emphasis is on individual transformation, individual awakening, individual enlightenment. East Asia, the emphasis shifted toward what's called the Bodhisattva path, that the path, the spiritual path we should follow is not just to be concerned about our own awakening, but to, when we realize that we're not separate from other people, it naturally follows that we're going to become concerned about their well-being as well. So bodhisattvas have a double path. They not only continue to work on their own transformation with meditation and such, but they realize that this is intimately connected, that they also need to be socially and ecologically engaged. And this is the first important point about that path, that you have this two sides, personal transformation, but also social, ecological transformation. And it's not just that they go together, but they really need each other if you think about it. If you know any social, ecological activists, you probably know that it's a very difficult path, often very frustrating. Often what we work for doesn't happen. And it's easy to burn out because sometimes it seems one is working really, really hard and not much is being achieved. So how important it is then for social activists, if they can ground their activism in some kind of contemplative or meditative path that can help stabilize them. We can return to that. We can ground ourselves in that, and that'll give us the energy and the perseverance that we need to continue. That's one aspect of the Bodhisattva path. From the other side, given what I said before, our concern for what's happening to other people, our concern for what's happening to the earth, this is something that flows naturally when we realize our non-separation from it. In fact, we can say, let me put it like this. When we still are caught up in the delusion of a separate self, it makes us self-preoccupied. It makes us narcissistic. We ask, what's in it for me? We're always thinking about ourselves. But when we realize our non-duality, our non-separation, there can be this important shift in the meaning of our lives where instead of asking, how is this serving me? We end up asking, well, what can I do to make this a better place for everyone? And the irony, as I see it, is that when we try to live in this fashion, the person who benefits most from this is the bodhisattva herself, or the bodhisattva himself. Because by doing that, we overcome our usual self-preoccupied habits. And we not only realize our non-duality with others, but we actualize that. And that's how we actually become a different kind of person. It's not about simply realizing our non-duality. What does it mean to actually live according to that? One of my favorite quotations is by actually not by a Buddhist, but by a Neo-Vedantin named Nisargadatta. And I think he put it very well when he said, "When I look inside and see that I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I look outside and see that I am everything, that is love. Between these two, my life flows." Love and wisdom, or wisdom and compassion, as we more often say it in Buddhism. And he shows the connection, right? Love here, it's not just an emotion, it's not a feeling, it's a way of being, a new way of being that embodies this realization of our non-separation. So for me, in a way, that's the foundation, that's the heart of the Bodhisattva path. But I think today we need to understand it in a somewhat larger fashion. Traditionally, it's individuals helping other individuals. Today we have to go beyond that. One way to express this, in Buddhism we don't talk so much about good versus evil. Rather, the important thing is something that we need to realize, some awakening, something cognitive. But still, the problems that we experience when we're not awakened, Buddhism often expresses those as the three poisons, or sometimes the three fires, sometimes the three roots of evil. These are the problems that we need to address in ourselves. Traditionally, greed, number one, ill will or hatred, number two, and third, delusion. These are the three fires or the three poisons. And as I said earlier, traditionally, Buddhism has understood these as individual problems that we have to work on. What I think we need to realize today is how these three poisons have become institutionalized and how they are at the core of the ecological crisis. What do I mean by that? Institutionalized because they have taken on a life of their own. For example, if greed means that you never have enough, I think that's a pretty good description of our economic system, corporate consumer capitalism, right? Consumers never consume enough, but also corporations, never profitable enough, market share never big enough, share prices never high, they always more, which is a problem on a finite planet that doesn't grow, right? Why is more and more always better if it can never be enough? But I think we can also see the other two problems have become institutionalized. It's certainly very clear here in the United States, right? Institutionalized ill will, well, we have things like racism, but certainly nationalism, militarism. If we measure it by the amount of money we spend, the United States is the most militarized society in human history, right? And if you spend that much money on your military, you're going to want to use it once in a while. You're going to want to throw your weight around, which is, what we do. So in that sense, I think we can say the ill will too, having taken on a life of its own. And then going on quickly to the third poison, institutionalized delusion. When I first thought about that, I thought of advertising. How it is that advertising subtly keeps us thinking that we are consumers, right? That the way to become happy is to buy something more. It's always the next thing you buy is going to make you happy. So advertising is a kind of institutionalized delusion that makes us understand ourselves or tends to push us in this direction. Now, traditionally advertising, but frankly, looking at what's happened over the last decade or so, I think we need to talk about fake news, right? We need to talk, at least here in the US. I can't say about Finland, but in the US we have Fox News. And then we have the delusions of X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, and most of all, now we have a president who basically seems to lie almost every time he opens his mouth, right? He's only president because he's been so good at taking advantage of this Fox News and similar versions of fake news. So I think you can see what I'm getting at here. If we put those three things together, right, individual and collective greed, individual and collective ill will, individual and collective delusion, I think it really helps us understand the roots of the ecological crisis. It also implies how it is that we need to work together to address it. Again, the traditional Buddhist path is very individual, but if we're facing institutional challenges like this, we're going to have to form organizations, right? Groups that work together. 350.org, Extinction Rebellion are two examples dear to my heart, but also we need to work in terms of putting pressure on legislatures and so forth. I remember something Bill McKibben said when he was in Paris for the climate talks a while ago. Someone said to him, "What can I do as an individual?" And he said, "Stop being an individual." That's not enough, what we do individually. Yes, we know we need to reduce our carbon footprint, but we also need to find ways to work together to challenge these institutionalized poisons. Yeah. I don't want to talk too long, but let me just make one more point. Let me emphasize in conclusion what I think is it certainly stands out for me, the single most important aspect of the Bodhisattva path, which is that bodhisattvas are unattached to the results of their actions. Now, this is a kind of a dangerous thing to say because it's easily misunderstood. Buddhism does emphasize a lot on motivation, our intentions. And so you might think, oh, it doesn't matter if anything I do makes any difference. The only thing that's important is the purity of my intention. And if we think that way, well, that kind of casual attitude, it's pretty guaranteed that, in fact, nothing will happen. But I think that misses the point here. Rather, the non-attachment to action is acknowledging that we don't really know what the results of our actions will be. It's not an attempt to deny the importance of thinking strategically, thinking very carefully about how it is that we might actually cause some change. But it is acknowledging a teaching very important in Buddhism, especially in Zen, don't know mind. Don't know in the sense that there's a fundamental mystery here. There's a fundamental problem, inability with our way to really understand completely what's going on. But nonetheless, our job is to do the very best we can in a non-dogmatic way, ready to change what we think and what we do as the situation changes, or as our understanding of the situation changes. I remember one of my teachers, Robert Aiken, liked to say that our path isn't about clearing up the mystery. Our path is making the mystery clear. That on the Buddhist path, in a way, the emphasis on overcoming the delusion of self, it's about opening up, experiencing the world in a non-dual fashion, and realizing there's something fundamentally mysterious about it, as well as sacred. it's not as though we grasp it. It's not as though we get to a point when we're so enlightened, we think, oh, now I understand everything. No, it's the opposite. It's opening up to something that grasps us and transforms us. And we find ourselves, again, doing the very best we can, but not knowing what the final result will be. So that to me may be the single most important thing about the Bodhisattva path, especially in a time when it's so dangerous, right? We literally, things are bad, and we can't know for sure whether anything we do is going to make any difference whatsoever. Now, in many cases, that would be very discouraging. Why bother, right? To do what we can, even though we don't know what is going to come out of it. Another way to say it is that our ecological engagement is really, it's our gift. We should think of it as our gift to each other, our gift to the world. And, as we know, if you give a gift to someone and you expect something in return, it's not really a gift, is it? A gift should be given freely, and I think that should be the attitude of our activism at this point. We do what we can because it's needed. And we do it not out of a sense of fear or despair or anger, right? We do it out of a realization of our love for the earth, and our concern for the earth flows out of that. There's a wonderful quotation. I can't remember the guy. In any case, I don't know anything about him. But I thought he put it really well when he said, the earth doesn't want to be saved. It wants to be loved. That's how you save it. And when I heard that, I thought, wow, that's it. That's it. That it's so important that our activism be motivated by that love, in which case the frustrations, the uncertainty about what the results will be, that won't stop us. Think, for example, if you are by the bedside of somebody that you really love, maybe a relative or a dear friend, and maybe it's a very serious illness. Maybe this person may well be dying. Well, we don't say, oh, looks like he or she is going to die. Too bad, and go home. I mean, that's not our attitude. We want to be there for the person. We want to do everything we can. And I think that's what's really important at this point, is when we're motivated, acting out of that love, then that's what will keep us, it will keep giving us the energy that's so necessary today. And where does the love come from? Well, remembering what Nisargadatta said. When we realize we are everything, that's love. My main Zen teacher, Yamada Koen Roshi in Japan, his own deep experience, his own great awakening happened when he remembered a famous Zen quotation. I came to is nothing other the original character. It's more like heart mind. But when we realize this is what it is, when we realize the earth is our mother, not just our home, then our activism is grounded naturally in the love rather than the anger or the fear. And that, it seems to me, is exactly what's needed today. Let me end with one more quick thing. Since I wrote the Ekodharma book, and I frankly don't remember if this is mentioned at all in the new preface, people would sometimes contact me, and they'd say, "Oh, I really want to be a bodhisattva or an ecosattva. What should I do?" Even though the book says pretty clearly Buddhism doesn't give us, that those specific kinds of answers. But in response to that, I've started talking about three questions, three contemplations, three meditations, if you will, that I think can help us decide for ourselves what's appropriate. So let me just end by sharing those with you, because I think we need to ask ourselves these questions and to keep asking ourselves them. Number one, what do I have to offer? Taking account of everything about my situation, right? Age, health, contacts. Am I still working? Do I need money? Who's dependent on me, etc., etc. Second question, given what I have to offer, what are the good possibilities for me? I mean, there are so many things that need to be done, but obviously we need to focus. We can't do everything. We're different personality types in different situations, so it's important to think about what's appropriate for us. And third, the third and final question, having really thought through those first two questions, then we go inside and we ask ourselves, what calls to my heart? What really calls to me? It's not just an ego decision, sort of weighing up pros and cons, but what do I feel inspired to do? Because, of course, if we're acting out of that, then we're much more likely to have more energy and probably more likely that what we try to do is going to be effective. So I've started talking about those questions, and it, not only on the individual level, but groups too can use them as a way to decide what they want to do. Here at Mountain Cloud, they have an Ekodharma group, and they've been using those questions, discussing them, to ask, what do they as a group want to do? But anyway, I think I've talked long enough, or as often happens, more than long enough. So I'll try to stop here and open things up, go back to Mikko and see if there's any comments, questions, responses. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for your words. They're very, very up to point in this moment of time that we live. And now I would like to turn this to the audience. If there's someone who would like to ask something, and I can pass on the mic, but also the camera, so you can see and hear what someone has to ask. All right. Thank you, David.
Also, I noticed for people online, they could speak. They could also text if they preferred, whatever, yeah. But feel free. I should apologize at the beginning. My hearing isn't always so good, so I might need the question or the comment to be repeated, but let's see how it goes. Maybe I was so clear, made everything. Maybe not.
No, I can talk. Is it open now?
Yes.
Thank you very much for very interesting presentation. And my background is I have been in Bhutan many times because I have I've been finalizing or collecting material for my PhD. And first time I went to Bhutan, I fell in love with the country immediately. And my question is, after this discussion or after this introduction about Buddhism and way of life, how our what is his name? David, how does he see, how do people in Bhutan, and especially the young people, follow these, let's say, principles? how they live according to the principles what he was sharing with us. Thank you.
Again, I'm sorry to say that the distortion of the media and so forth, maybe Mikko can repeat?
I will pass it on. So she's been living in Bhutan and doing PhD studies over there. And she wanted to ask...
Mikrofoniin täytyy puhua, niin menee tuonne nauhalle.
She wanted to ask if you know about the people in Bhutan, how do they live according to these principles that you just presented? Do you know anything about that?
Interesting, because I haven't been to Bhutan. I've been to India many times and Nepal, in fact, earlier this year. But and there's an international network of engaged Buddhist conference in Nepal and Bhutan later in the year, but it's not clear yet if I can go to that. So I'm not so informed about the situation in Bhutan, but as many of you probably know, one of the reasons that country is famous is that instead of focusing simply on GNP, gross national product, they also talk about gross national happiness. They have an alternative way of measuring how happy they are. And, you know, given what I was saying earlier about greed, I think it's a really, really important that they try to develop a kind of an alternative model. I mean, we notice how preoccupied just about every other nation is with its economic growth and how it tends to measure happiness as if GNP kind of refers to the happiness of people. So the fact that people in Bhutan have a different standard is wonderful. Now, I'm not so sure how that's working out in practice and how much they've had to modify it over time. I remember some years ago, one of the ways of measuring gross national happiness was how much people smiled. Gross national smiles. I don't know if that's still the case. Maybe the questioner in her research has some idea. My guess is she has. She knows a lot more about what's going on there than I or the rest of us do. But it does seem to me, in some ways, from what I hear, that by avoiding model, it is offering us an alternative way forward. Maybe the questioner would want to say more about come back, but maybe not. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we lost you there for a second again. At the end, you had a question to us. What was the question?
Oh. The question is simply that I think the questioner knows a lot more about Bhutan than the rest of us do. So I'm wondering if she would like to contribute something based on that experience. Feel free if you like to.
All right, I will pass this to her.
Yeah. It's an important question. You know, how much is Bhutan offering us a different kind of economic and ecological and political model? Goodness knows we need one. Yeah.
Well, can you hear me now? Indeed, where can I start and how can I answer this question? I'm getting myself a little bit confused now. But as I said, I went to Bhutan after being in many countries. I was developing the education system in different countries because Finland was so high in education. So we developed with some Bhutanese a plan how can they develop their education. And then that plan went to the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in Finland, and when they saw it and they looked at more detailed what kind of country Bhutan is, so their final decision was Bhutan does not need development aid. So this plan what we prepared together with three Bhutanese was never developed. But indeed, I agree with the answer from the ministry that they don't need this standard development aid. And let me ask now, what was the main question now? I asked, how do people live in Bhutan? Was it so? So what was his reaction on that? One example I have to say is that when UN developed Sustainable Development Goals, 17 Sustainable Development Goals, they went to Bhutan to study how people in Bhutan live according to the Sustainable Development Principles. And that was quite important for Bhutanese also, because they have been a little bit isolated country, so there has not been very many people who have been studied how people live there. And of course, many people have asked me how do they get some money to live? Where do they get? And they live very modest life, of course. But now I try to remember what I have answered them. It's such a long time.
Maybe we continue to other questions.
Yeah. Okay, I think it's better to some other people ask some questions now.
If
Thank you.
someone else has something to...
Thank you. Over to Anne, I guess.
I'm very
Welcome.
happy to see you again. Welcome.
Oh, hi.
You had
Okay.
a question, please.
Hi, Miko. Good to see you. Hi, David. I know both of you. I know Miko from Zen Peacemakers, and he was in the first cohort along with me. And David, I know you from Boulder, and I'm a friend of Kritik Kenko. And so thank you both. So here's a question for you, David. This idea, because I struggle with this myself in the recent past, the idea of how do you know what is fake news? And so you talk about delusion, and but there are so many high-tech mechanisms now in the information we are receiving through whatever, through media, through whatever, and it's very sophisticated. The ability to influence is very, very sophisticated now. So how do you know what fake news is? Because I noticed I've had kind of a political change. I'm living in Canada, but I'm a US citizen. And I've had a political change because I see all sides of the partisan sphere use mechanisms for influencing us. So could you just speak to that?
I wish I could. Thank you for the question. It's the great question, or certainly one of the great questions now. How do we respond given the role of the very sophisticated and very technologically developed forms of mass deception, mass delusion, right? Including now AI, which is just beginning. And that's such an essential question. But as I said, I wish I had an answer to it. I can't pretend that I do. And I'd love to come back to you, because the fact that you asked the question makes me think you have some further thoughts. Would you share those with us?
Yes, thank you. So in my own practice, I'm trying to become less partisan, more non-separation between, my relatives who live in Oklahoma and what is influencing their lives and what is influencing me up here in Canada. So I guess that would be my practice, is to try to not get too influenced by just one voice and try to be beyond partisanship.
So that's essential, isn't it? I mean, I think I was talking earlier about the delusion of self and other, and of course that fits very well into the political landscape these days, the fact that us versus them, right? And I think it's important to realize the implications of not only Buddhism, but I'm thinking, for example, the Good Samaritan story in Christianity. That parable, the Buddha says, Jesus says that in response to this question, who is my neighbor? And he goes ahead and he gives this beautiful story about the Good Samaritan. And, Samaritans and Jews, they didn't really get along all that well. But he's saying it's not sectarian. And the same thing in Buddhism, where we have the metta practice, as you know, where, we generate these feelings of goodwill, may I be healthy, may I be happy, and so forth. We start with ourselves, but then we go out and we don't simply say, well, it only applies to liberals or it only applies to Democrats, right? It extends to everyone. So what I'm trying to point here is how for both traditions, and it's very essential nowadays, the emphasis on universalism, right? We don't always maybe like to say it, but Donald Trump has the same Buddha nature as anybody else, and the same essential nature as my Buddha would, as my teacher would say. And clearly, this attempt to reach across divides is going to be an essential part of any kind of resolution. So I really appreciate your highlighting that. Yeah. Again, it's not so, we can reach out. What do we do when the people don't want to be reached out to? There's all these challenges. It's not necessarily simple, but I think it's absolutely essential. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Adam. Any more questions? We still have one more. So if there's no more questions, I would like to tell a short story of my personal reason to really to embark on this path of Ekodharma. It was in spring 2019, and I went to one of the first meetings of the Extinction Rebellion Elokapina here in Helsinki. And there was split into short groups, and I got into a group with a man in his 60s and a younger woman, and we were meant to be talking of how does it feel to be facing this future of climate crisis. And this young woman immediately started to cry, and the reason was that she couldn't see the future as similar as the older generations had. So she couldn't really see that she would have same kind of future than her parents had. And she couldn't see that her kids would be growing up in a planet that could be secure and safe and stable as it has been. And that was really an eye-opener for myself, and I decided that there is something that needs to be done. And one of the things that I decided to do was to try to translate this book and have it published here in Finland. And I'm so happy to be here in this moment, even though the situation is dire. And but I'm very happy that we have you here, David, even through spotty internet connection via Zoom, but still you're here. And also to have all of you here to witness this moment that we have your book here in Finnish. Thank you so much.
Maybe I can add one more thing briefly?
Of course.
If it's okay? No? We sometimes talk about globalization. I expect you have a comparable term in Finnish, right? And when we use the word, the focus is so often on like economics and multinational corporations or political, international organizations like the UN and so forth. What I think is really interesting is that we are still in the very early days of the globalization of our religious traditions. So far, they're more aware of each other in the modern world, but there's a lot of defensiveness. We're the best. Sometimes they have something good to offer another religion, but that's because they have some similarities with us. And I think it's very exciting to realize that at this point in history, we're going to get this interaction and this mutual learning from each other. It's inevitable. It's really inevitable. And one of the reasons it's so important is so often religious traditions, sometimes including Buddhism, has understood the path as about escaping or transcending the world, as I mentioned at the beginning. And I think what we're now beginning to move toward, and it's very much connected with the ecological crisis, is an understanding of the religious traditions that identify with this world. There's a Buddhist teaching, there's a Taoist saying, those who love the world as their own body can be entrusted with the world. And it seems to me this is where we need to move, that the ecological crisis, the great poly crisis we have today, is just as much a crisis and a challenge to all of our religions, to all of our spiritual traditions, to reevaluate what they have to say, and rather than devaluing this world as simply a means to go somewhere else, we're at this crucial turning point in our spiritual traditions where a religious perspective from a learning so much and my understanding of Ekodharma is one expression of the kind of way in which Buddhism and others need to transform. I hope that made some sense. I kind of stumbled my way through it. Yeah. The other thing, sorry, since I have the platform just for a second, I do want to mention that I'm going to be teaching Ekodharma retreats in Europe this July, in Ireland, in India, and in Spain. So if people really want to delve more deeply into it, please check out my website or let me know in some way, and we can follow up. And again, thank you to Mikko for, he's done all the work to make this happen, the book and this session this evening. So thank you again for making it possible.
Thank you so much. And before we move on to some drinks here, and so I would like to show you a music video. You've seen this, David, in 2019. It's a song composed by my wife, Maya. She's here too. And the lyrics is by Reino Helismaa, and the title is Onni, jonka annoin pois, but it's been translated into English by me, so this goes a full circle. So first I translated into English, and now I translate into Finnish. And the video is by me too, and we produced the video together with Maya. So I'd like to show it to you. It's only a few minutes, so we end it with this. Thank you so much. And I'd like to also thank everyone over there on Zoom. Thanks so much for joining, especially my sweet teacher, Frank de Valer-Rochi from Belgium. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks.
Accepting myself that I was cruel, but